The first project on the wheel is to simply learn how to lift up the clay. And so we're going to call your first project cylinders. The idea isn't to make something boring, but to lift the clay. And the most effective way to do it is to try and pick it straight up. So cylinders don't need to be boring or straight, but that's what you're going to work on first. But as soon as you figure out how to make cylinders, we're going to make shapes. And there's infinite possibilities with shapes, but they all come from straight lines, convex surfaces, concave surfaces, and combinations. And this combination is smooth S-curves, but combinations could also be any mixture. Once we've made shapes, we're actually going to go ahead and put handles on. This will teach you how to attach clay to clay in a very practical way. So I'll just draw some quick handles here. Handles oftentimes have something to do with the shape that they're on, but you can be inventive. You don't need to make handles which are practical. You can make handles which are interesting to you as well. That one's too big. It's actually a good idea to draw things so you have some idea what might be interesting to try. It's a good idea to have a sense of what shape you're going to make before you start. If you go back and forth, change the direction one way and change it back again, pretty soon the clay will get tired and just want to lay down on you. So when I start, I have an idea of roughly what kind of shape I'm going to make. So I recommend that you begin with something in your mind, and then it's okay to work with what happens on the wheel. It's okay to have a conversation with the clay if that's how your pieces work out. But start off with something in mind, starting with how big this is. If you make the bottom wide, you're going to end up with a shorter piece oftentimes with less vertical room in order to experiment with the shape. But if you're going to make a piece that goes like this, then you need to make it wide. So right away I have to have some idea what I'm doing. Almost all these forms begin with the same gesture of recentering the clay and then coning the clay. And when I'm coning the clay, I'm trying to pick it up as far as I can. Generally speaking, I don't start shaping when I'm coning the clay. I'm just trying to lift it. If I can make the clay tall, I can make it into a shape easier. This piece of clay has a stiff chunk in the rim, so this is the best time to fix something like that. If you wait until your piece is done to cut off the bad spot, it's more difficult, and you may not have enough thickness to make a rim. Okay, so I have a pretty strong idea what shape I'm going to make. I put as many fingers as will fit into here. There is a certain size where it's possible to reach the bottom and not have all your fingers inside. And the less drag you have, the more likely you're going to have a successful shape. I'm going to start throwing the shape directly. So as I'm lifting the clay, I'm putting it more or less where I want it. And I know I want this to be a little bit smaller at the shoulder, so I'll collar it now. When the clay is still thick, it's easier to control when you're collaring it. This is removing extra weight as well as finishing the shape all the way down to the wheel head. So the wall is parallel. This is the correct thickness down here. I'm not watching my hands. It's really important that you watch the shape that you're making past where your hands are. So I'm actually looking, from my perspective, I'm looking out here where the shape is starting to go around the corner. I've almost got it. I'm making a shape that is, I'm thinking about for a coffee cup or something to drink out of. So kind of symbolically, the bottom is the container and then the upper part is the transfer from the mass of below. And generally speaking, if I'm going to pick something up right off the wheel, I need it dry down here. That's one of the reasons why I use the rib when I'm shaping so much. This rib, being flexible, allows me to very readily make that curve as well. So I'm going to use the rib to reinforce the curve that I've already thrown. This is drying the piece so that it's easier to lift. I kind of want a sharp corner here, so I'll use the corner of the rib to establish that and then catch the rest of the clay. So this is pretty much the idea that I had in mind when I started. This is a much smaller piece of clay. It's harder to center a small piece of clay, but it's okay to make very small pieces for your assignment as well. I think you should experiment with larger and smaller. This is harder to center by far than a bigger piece of clay. When I make very small pieces, I generally throw them off the hump. But for this assignment, I don't want you to trim the bottom of anything. I want it to be finished when you take it off the wheel. So for this reason, I'm throwing this small piece of clay directly on the wheel head.